الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا السماء انفطرت وإذا الكواكب انتثرت وإذا البحار فجرت وإذا القبور بعثرت علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت. يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك كلا بل تكذبون بالدين وإن عليكم لحافظين كراما كاتبين يعلمون ما تفعلون إن الأبرار لفي نعيم وإن الفجار لفي جحيم يصلونها يوم الدين وما هم عنها بغائبين وما أدراك ما يوم الدين ثم ما أدراك ما يوم الدين يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله. السلام.
The translation of the verses: in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, when the sky is a cleft asunder, when the stars are scattered, when the oceans are suffered to burst forth, and when the graves are turned upside down, then shall each soul know what it hath sent forward, and what it hath kept back. O man, what has seduced thee from the Lord most beneficent? Him who created thee fashioned thee in due proportion, and gave thee a just base. In whatever form he wills, does he put thee together. Nay, but ye do reject right and judgment. But verily over you, and appoint angels to protect you, kind and honorable, writing down your deeds. They know and understand all that ye do. As for the righteous, they will be in bliss, and the wicked, they will be in the fire, which they will enter on the day of judgment, and they will not be able to keep away their form. And what will explain to thee what the day of judgment is? Again, what will explain to thee what the day of judgment is? It will be the day when no soul shall have power to go out for another. For the command that day will be holy with God.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We would like to welcome all of you. We all know that in here we have Brother Yusuf Islam. His former name was Cat Stephen, the British singer that you all know of. In 1977, he became a Muslim. And he became a Muslim after a terrific career in the music world. He was born in London and given a basic Christian education. He left school for the bright lights of theater. In that life, he wrote some songs over a period of 10 years. In many of his songs, we see or we can feel that they reflect a search for something about mystery of life. After that, Allah, God, guided him, and he was shown the light after he read a translation of Quran. Now, I don't want to be talking for a long time. We are happy to have him here to talk about his life and views as a Muslim. So there will be questions allowed after his speech. And Brother Yusuf Islam, would you please welcome?
Allahu Akbar. Allah. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, the creator and sustainer of the universe, I greet you with the Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very happy to be here in Tucson. It's nice and warm and comfortable, and my children are enjoying it. I brought my family with me also. The title of my talk was going to be My Life as a Muslim. But first of all, I'd like to clarify certain things about the religion which we know as Islam. First of all, we should understand that it's not a unique faith which began 1400 years ago in Arabia with the advent of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. He is not to be considered as the founder of this religion. And the Quran, which is the book, the holy book which was revealed to him through revelation, makes it very clear that Islam means submission to the will of the Almighty, the creator of the heavens and the earth. Submission of man to God. The Quran explains that this is in fact the one and only faith which was consistently revealed to mankind since the beginning. And God has sent prophets and messengers at different times in the history of man to revive this one and only faith, submission and obedience to God and His way. So therefore, from the Islamic perspective, Islam is not a new religion. It is just the completion of the religion which took place with the last prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him. The preservation of the Quran is vital to that. And it was the same faith as all the prophets before, beginning with Adam. And we see many of the names of prophets in the Quran who we recognize, such as Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and all being brothers in one faith. I was introduced to Islam in 1976 when I received a copy of the Quran translation. And before that I had some idea that Islam was more like an ancient culture, some kind of lost civilization, and we could see some buildings, remnants of this civilization. We saw some Muslims, but it seemed that Islam was more like a nationality than it was a dynamic way of life or something as an alternative to what we already knew here in the West. So we didn't know much about Islam in the West. Our history books included very little about this religion called Islam. I was brought up in a way as a child of this free world. I was given a Christian education. I learned in those early years how to view religion through a Christian process. I believed in God and I believed in Jesus, but I believed there was no way to God except through Jesus. And I accepted that. But as I looked around me in the world, it seemed that there was a dichotomy, a division. In religion, we're taught one thing, but in the life, generally, we're taught something else. I could see that there was another view of life, a scientific, if you like, view. And in that view, there was no necessity for anything like God. This was the age of TV, this was the age of space exploration, this was the age of the atom bomb. This was a new age, a new awakening. But there were many questions left unanswered, both from this concept and from, it seemed, the religious concept. From the religious point of view, it seemed that life was meant to be kind of a suffering. You had to suffer. To be good, you had to kind of go through hell. But from the other point of view, from the scientific point of view, you could enjoy your life, have as much of it as you like or as you can get. But at the same time, remember that in the end there's nothing after the grave. Finished. As you say in Arabic, khalas. So there I had a choice. Either this kind of difficult, suffering, path, religious path, or you had this kind of just materialistic outlook of life with nothing really, no purpose to it, except to eat, drink, be merry. So I took the easiest, naturally, and the education which I received was more or less geared towards helping you to make that decision, and I chose to follow the path of happiness, joy, and the good things of life, and to get as much of it as I could. So I looked around at the options and I found that everybody's working incredibly hard, and I thought, well, let's try and get out of this. And I saw that there was new golden opportunities being offered. There were the Beatles. All of a sudden there was music all around, and ordinary guys could come and suddenly overnight become millionaires and have such an influence on the world. I thought, well, that's for me. So I went into the music business. I chose myself an appropriately ridiculous name so that people wouldn't forget who sang that song. And I had my first hit about 19. Suddenly I was shot into orbit among the stars, and very soon I was very dizzy. I was thrust into this so-called high life, the life of show business, glitter, dazzle. But it was incredibly difficult, and it was obviously, I realized after entering it, rather dishonest. And you had to, in fact, act most of your way through it. So I took recourse to drinking and smoking and all sorts of things. Finally, after 1 year, I'd come back down to earth. And then I started thinking again about life, evaluating it from my hospital bed. I'd contracted tuberculosis, and from there I started to reflect again. And from that point, I think I started my search for the truth. I began studying meditation, and in a way I went on a spiritual search and a quest for enlightenment. I also reflected that in my music, because after that I started writing songs again, and that's when my second career, if you like, took off. And I began writing songs which I felt were expressing my journey. But throughout all this, I did have a feeling in the back of my mind, or in the back of my heart, if you like, that there was someone guiding me. But I wanted to know what was the mystery behind this universe and behind my existence. So I started searching and singing about it. I studied various religions and various philosophies. I think we all know how many different ideas there are around, how many choices there are to make. I studied Buddhism. I studied Zen. At one time I was interested in astrology. I thought perhaps all the answers are already written. Life is just a kind of an unfolding of destiny. You don't really choose who you are going to be. You find out that later. But if you have enough insight into what's going on, you may be able to predict who you're going to be or where you're going to end up. But there was lots of flaws and inaccuracies with that concept. I thought that somehow you had to at some time find a very holy person, someone who's going to hold you by the hand and guide you to the right answers. But somehow, even from the beginning, I didn't like submitting myself to any human being. I didn't like the idea of sitting at the foot of a guru, waiting for his, moment of guidance for me. I felt that, no, I'm being guided. I'll try my best to find it myself. Of course, I had my basic Christian upbringing also, but I wasn't satisfied with that. I felt there were more broader outlooks to life than just believing in Jesus as the blood atonement for my sins. I thought there was more that I had to do with this, more I had to do. So it was that I received the Quran in a way as an answer and a final gift, prize for my search. When I read the Quran, I was ready for anything. I didn't know what was inside the Quran. It could have been something similar to Hinduism, like many gods. Could have been that this man, Muhammad, was someone who Muslims were worshipping, like Christians were worshipping Jesus. I didn't know, because sometimes Islam, unfortunately, is called Mohammedanism. But that's because I think people don't understand what Islam is. So I was ready for anything. Then as I started to read the Quran, I was greatly surprised at finding a message which was so close and so striking to me. It begins, if you read the very first chapter of the Quran, I'll read it for you. I'll read it, in fact, in the Arabic, and then I'll give you the English translation. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. Translation of those 7 verses which begin the Quran. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. All praise be to God, the Lord of the worlds, the most gracious, the most merciful, owner of the day of judgment. You alone we worship. You alone we ask for help. Show us the straight path, the path of those whom thou hast blessed, not the path of those who earn your anger, nor of those who go astray. From the very beginning of the Quran, you notice that it begins in the name of one God. And it doesn't say that this is the God just of the Arabs. It says, in the name of God, all praise belongs to God, Lord of the worlds. Lord of, in other words, of all things, the one and only God. The most gracious, the most merciful. This was very striking for me in the beginning, because I had up until that point no idea that Muslims even believed in the same God I did. I thought sometimes when I heard the name Allah, I thought that this was some kind of maybe an Arab deity. But in the translation it was clear that we were talking about the one and only God. And as it continues, you can see the heart of this chapter when it says, you alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. This was a totally new idea for me in religion, to be able to go straight to God and pray. Because before, as I said, I had a concept you had to go through some kind of agency, some channel, some personality, some doctrine. But in the Quran, it seemed to be saying no. This is the book which is opening the way to God direct. And it says, show us the straight path. I'd never heard those words before. It seems so obvious. When somebody wants to go from somewhere to somewhere else, it's obvious that the best, the shortest way would be to take a direct line, a straight way, to avoid going this way or that way, to avoid crookedness. And this is what it said in the Quran, guide us on the straight way. Well, I was totally amazed, and I felt very much as if I'd found some treasure. Not only that, in the Quran I found some verses which were very unlike anything I'd ever read before. Again, as I say, not talking specifically to Arabs. I thought before that this book must just belong to Arabs and to Turks, and it has no relationship with me. But in certain verses you can see that it's directed to all human beings. When it says, for instance, O mankind, worship your Lord who created you and those before you, that you may become God conscious, who has appointed the earth as a resting place for you and the sky as a canopy, and has caused water to pour down from the sky, thereby producing fruits for you as food. And do not set up rivals next to God when you know better. The message of the Quran was becoming very clear to me, that this religion is to guide people to worship God alone, and not to make any other God as a partner with him. In fact, in the Quran, that is mentioned also as being one of the greatest sins. That is, to make a partner with God, or to associate with him any other idea of deity or power, because all praise, all power belongs to God. I found that this led to an obvious conclusion that religion has to be one. In God's sight, religion has to be submission to his will. And that's what it says in the Quran. Verily, religion with God is submission. And whoever chooses a religion other than submission, and that is a direct word translated means Islam. Whoever chooses a religion other than submission or Islam, then it will not be accepted of him, and in the hereafter he will be of the losers. I started getting worried. Perhaps it's right, perhaps it's true, perhaps if I don't believe it, I'm going to be one of the losers. So I tried to look for faults. My first instinct was to try and find out who wrote this book, so I could find out, some mistakes, some errors. But the Quran doesn't tell you that it was written by such and such. It doesn't say that this is a book written by Muhammad. No. The Quran itself says, this is a revelation which we have inspired to you, meaning the Prophet was a messenger, an agency, someone who received God's message. But he was a man, just like other prophets before him. He said, we inspired you with this religion as we inspired prophets before you. I think I'll try to find this verse if I can, which mentions that. It says, I can't find the exact verse, but I'll give you it says, lo, as for those who sunder their religion, in other words, who divide their religion and become schismatics, in other words, sects, no concern at all hast thou with them. Their case will go to God, who will tell them what they used to do. Whoever brings a good deed will receive tenfold the like thereof, and whoso brings an ill deed will be awarded but the like thereof, and they will not be wronged. Say, lo, as for me, my Lord has guided me unto a straight path, a right religion, the community of Abraham, the upright, who was not an idolater. So I began to realize that this was the same religion as the religion of Abraham. And Abraham was not a Christian or a Jew, as it says in the Quran. He was an upright man. It says, say, lo, my worship and my sacrifice, my living and my dying are for God, the Lord of the worlds. He has no partner. This I am commanded, and I am the first of those who surrender. And in Arabic, it says, وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. I am the first of the Muslimin, the Muslims. That's the meaning of the word Muslim, one who surrenders. So from that point of view, I started realizing that from the Islamic concept, all the prophets were Muslim. they surrendered their will to the will of God. I began to get very worried. And I thought, well, let's see if we can find some mistakes along the way. But the more I read, the more I realized that it was I who had to change. And I was not going to find any mistakes in the Quran. It mentions also in the Quran names of other prophets, which I felt very happy about because, of course, I liked already to keep to certain things which I believed in, like I believed in Jesus. But being a Muslim doesn't mean that you reject Jesus, because the Quran says that, lo, he was a pure prophet and messenger from God, born from a word, because God only has to say be. When he intends something, he just has to say be, and it is. And that's what it said in the Quran. But it made a distinction here. It said that Jesus, lo, he was a truthful messenger. But it said very clearly that he was not a son of God, just as much as Adam could not be taken as a son of God, even though Adam perhaps has more right, because he didn't have a father or a mother. So this was making sense to me. And also it mentioned Moses. In fact, I think it mentions Moses more times in the Quran than any other prophet, as an example, and how he was an archetypal prophet. How he came to lead the children of Israel from the grip of the Pharaoh, and how they were victorious. So after reading all this, I thought, well, perhaps there's something right about this religion, and I should start to accept it. Then I started to try and put into practice certain things, like trying to be honest, as it says in the Quran, be with the truthful, avoid drinking, it says. So I didn't go all the way, but I started reducing my intake, because you can't do everything all at once. But I started practicing, seeing if I could take it, if my body was able to take it. And I found, yes, the more I followed the Quran, the better I felt. It said pray. So when I started praying, I didn't know exactly how to pray, but I knew who to pray to. And the more I prayed, the more I felt I was being guided. I was still making music at that time and still doing tours, but I was carrying the Quran religiously with me everywhere. And gradually my interest in music faded. And there was just one thing on my mind, and that was how to be a Muslim. I knew that it was going to have some kind of impact, because here was something, a religion I knew, which was quite strange. It seemed like an alien religion, but yet I discovered that it wasn't. So I saw no barrier between me now and the objective which I'd set out with in the beginning, which was to find the truth. Only I didn't expect it was going to happen so early. I thought I was going to be grey a long time before I found this answer. But God guides whom He wills. So finally in 1977, that was 1 year after I received the Quran, it took me a year to read it. Then I decided that there was no other course for me. I had two choices: either to follow this message, which it seemed to me comprehended everything that I'd already instinctively believed in anyway, but made it clearer, or to go on my own way, digging a path to who knows where. So there was no choice as far as I was concerned. I had to become a Muslim. And in 1977 I accepted Islam and I declared my faith. I didn't care if they knew who I was before or not. In fact, I thought most Muslims must be high above that kind of thing. So I went to the mosque just like any ordinary person, just wanting to be a Muslim. And I was ready to leave all my fame and everything behind me. All I had to do in that moment was to declare my faith. To become a Muslim, the key is to believe with your heart and to express with your tongue that there is no God but the one God, Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger, the seal of the messengers. So I declared my faith. I said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, which means I believe and I testify that there is no God except the one God, and I testify that Muhammad is his servant and messenger. And from that day I entered into the fold of Islam. I wasn't going to make any big news about it, but obviously I told my family and I told my friends. And I was still making music at that time, but I was on a cloud. Suddenly everything was becoming so clear. I started praying, because every day a Muslim must pray or worship. And the more that I worshiped, the more that I prayed, the better I felt. Now my life has, you could say, completely been transformed. I fell out of the scene in a way on purpose, because I felt that there were some questions hanging over this career of being a musician and being a singer. Although the Quran doesn't necessarily say thou shalt not sing or thou shalt not rock, yet there were implications. I was standing up on stage like I am today, unfortunately, being raised above my ordinary position to be in a way idolized, because that's what a lot of that business is about. Image building and creating idols to be sold in the marketplace. So I realized there was some conflict, even though music itself in some ways is quite innocent, but it's how we use it creates the problems. So I realized that, look, I should be honest, and I should start to study this religion before I do any mistakes. So I decided to withdraw from the music scene and to get married as soon as possible, because that was also part of your duty. Not a duty, but a need as well. So I got married in 1979. I had my last concert in 1979. And I had my first child in 1980. Now I see everything much clearer. I'm able to come and talk now because I feel that I have learned something, and that's one of the reasons why I withdrew to study. But I haven't been idle I've been working. Now I see that there is a need for people to understand this religion, so at least the fear of it will be removed. Because there's nothing worse than having something that you don't understand, and then you're likely to feel threatened by it. Today, in the turmoil of what is going on in the world, in the Muslim world, one must not be misguided by the actions of Muslims. I was lucky because I happened to come to the message of Islam before I came to meet the Muslim community. We're not saying that all the Muslims are bad, no way. Majority, in fact, you'll find, are beautiful people. Humble, you don't even notice them. But there are others who are louder, more expressive. But before you can judge them, if they are good Muslims or not, you have to know Islam. Don't judge Islam by Muslims. And Islam isn't that kind of religion which separates, the spiritual from the earthly. In other religions, I found that was a problem. You had to become a monk. You had to leave, your family, leave your wealth, close your bank account, give all your money away. No. Certain things, of course, you have to do. You have to be charitable. You have to give a certain amount of your wealth to the poor. But it doesn't mean you give all your wealth. And you don't disappear from the scene. Even though I may have appeared to have disappeared, I didn't. I was quite busy with my life, with the community, Muslim community in London. And you've got to take part in the world. That's the best way to be a good Muslim. As it says in one saying I read somewhere on one of these posters, it's easy to be an angel when your feathers are not being ruffled. So part of the test is to live in this world. Now I see that there's a lot of things in our concepts that have to be enlightened. The view, for instance, of the human being from the Islamic point of view, we can see that he is the cream of the creation. He's not an accident, but he's a creature with a special mission and given special responsibilities by God. Unlike the angels, who don't ever sin, who have no temptation. But mankind is given a test, the test of good and bad, an enormous test. But every man will be judged according to how he or she, every man, I'm talking about human beings in that sense, every human being will be judged according to what they do. You can't pass on your good deeds to me and I kind of keep it in my bank account for the day of judgment. No. I have my record. You have your record. And all mankind are equal. There's no such thing as a superior or master race concept. And there's no such thing also of, in a way, priesthood. In Islam there's no priesthood. You don't have to go to a certain priest or imam to be accepted or to be forgiven. I found that emancipated me from my concepts, which I was used to before that. The family in Islam is very important. So I noticed how much emphasis is placed on the family. Some people have strange concepts about how Islam treats women, perhaps because they've never been into a Muslim home. All they've done is read papers and seen pictures. But Islam stresses the sanctity and the importance of the home. There are some sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about this. For instance, he was asked once by someone saying, who should I give my companionship to? Who should I befriend, give my time to? He said, your mother. He said, who next? He said, your mother. He said, who next? He said, your mother. He said, who next? He said, then your father. Because in another saying he also clarified, paradise is at the feet of your mother. And in the Quran it also explains, revere your Lord and revere the womb that bore you. To give respect to the mother is one of the basic principles in Islam. Womanhood is not to be taken lightly. That's why I realized I had to get married. To give rights. And rights to the children. To have a stable, happy home. Also, how do you protect that home? Islam provides guidance. People say, oh, women have to dress up and cover themselves. Yes. Why? To protect their dignity, number one. They are not just objects for delight, for men to delight in and partake of at any time they wish. So I was learning the moral attitude of how to preserve the sanctity of men and women and the love between them, how to keep it. That is, that the woman, she is married to that man. She doesn't have to go out after that and show herself to anybody or to impress anybody after that. You go today for a job as a woman and you go there and see, if you don't come dressed with the best, hairdress and the latest style, showing yourself, will you get the job? No. I say, excuse me, honey, you don't look right. Why are you wearing that thing? Say, why are you bothered? You're after my skill, aren't you? No, honey. We want someone to attract, Exactly. That is what the woman is being used for and misused for. Yet, when Islam tries to give dignity to women, they're laughed at. How many nuns do you laugh at? You laugh at the nuns? Of course not. You respect them. And that's what is the respect that you gain in Islam by dressing dignified. It doesn't mean you don't have beautiful clothes, you don't have gold jewelry or whatever, but you keep that for your husband, for those of your family, for those who know you, who are allowed to see you, not those who are not allowed. So all the injunctions which you find in Islam about dress, it may seem strange, but actually if you analyze it, it's very important, and you see the reasons for it. Men, by the way, have certain rules as well. It doesn't mean that only women have to dress up like that. Men are not supposed to wear silk. They're not supposed to wear gold. They're supposed to also cover themselves in a modest way, not to reveal their body or certain parts of their body or to show themselves. There's also rules for men. But of course, there is much more beauty, I think we must agree, given to the woman. As far as my social life is concerned, if you look at your friends, you'll find that everybody has friends according to certain values which you share. Of course, my friends had to change. It didn't mean that I cut off my relationship completely. But everybody has got to have those values which they share. That's what makes a friendship. If we both support the same soccer team, we can be friends. If we both, go to the same club, we can be friends. But those things are kind of shallow relationships. In Islam, the best relationship is based on faith. I believe what you do. I believe in the same God you do. I worship the same God you do. I bow to Him with you. And that is a symbol, as we see, if you see the prayer in Islam, all Muslims stand in a line, shoulder to shoulder, whether they're rich or poor or whatever. They have to stand in a line, facing the same way towards Mecca, because Mecca is a symbol of the unity of God. It's not a symbol, the building itself is not sacred as such, but it is a symbol of the oneness of God, the oneness of the religion of Abraham, because Abraham built that house in Mecca, the first house of God. So therefore, we can see how Islam guides us into our relationships. Also, a saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, choose your friends carefully. If you choose someone who is a perfume seller, you'll end up smelling sweet. But if you choose, a blacksmith, you might get burnt. Such a simple saying, but so obvious. We have to be careful who we take our influences from. Today, I think the most vital thing, and the thing which I'm engaged in most, is the area of education. And in a way, life, all of life is an education. I mean, you go in the beginning to who? You go to your mother, your father. If you find out things, you learn. This is the first school. You keep on learning as you go through life, then you go into kind of institutionalized education. But there we have, I believe, some problems today, which is why we're seeing the results in the society itself. It's child-centered, self-centered education, which we're seeing today. Regardless of the collective whole, the rights of the individual to his liberty, his imagination, it actually damages the society in the end. Of course, everyone has a right, everyone has their rights, but they should not interfere with other people's rights. Therefore, there's a collective duty as well. And when we're teaching children in schools, what are we teaching them? Are we teaching them that America is the greatest? England is the greatest? How many things have we overlooked? Have we hidden from the children in their view of the world? I mean, we know how easy it is to brainwash children. How many have been brainwashed into thinking the way they do today? Because of lack of knowledge or lack of information about other people's way of lives. That's very important. From the Islamic perspective, you learn about other people's way of lives from the beginning. You learn to respect. There's no compulsion in religion. You have a duty to be good to your neighbor, whether he's Christian, Jew, Muslim, whatever. What kind of moral teachings are we getting in schools today? What about the use of resources of this earth? How are we gearing the children to think about the resources of this earth? Generally, we can see it is a trend towards get what we can while it's there. That is not the attitude. That is pollution, and that's what it leads to. Even the Prophet taught us that even if you wash even in a river, you shouldn't waste the water. You shouldn't use more water than you need. Just to imbue in us that respect for the creation which has been given to us for our use by God. So therefore Islam, I found, addressed all aspects of life. As far as politics is concerned, it doesn't stop you from having different views. As you can see, there are many different views amongst Muslims today. But they're not following Islam. Many of them are disregarding certain aspects of Islam and just taking the ones that they want. But Islam teaches, first of all, to run your life by God's laws. That is the way in which to find harmony in the world. How to achieve peace? God has shown us how to achieve peace. The first way is to come to peace with God. And the word Islam itself, I think, should no longer be frightening to you. The word itself comes from the word salam. Salam means peace. And that's how I began my talk today, by saying Assalamu alaikum. I wrote a song once called Peace Train. I had an idea and an instinct perhaps that somehow, somewhere, there is a train in which all people can get on it and get to the same place. But where it was, I didn't know. Now I know. The way is to God. Some of us may get there sooner, but everyone's going to be there on the Day of Judgment, facing God. As it says in the Quran, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Verily, we all belong to God, and to Him we're returning. So I hope that you've learned something from my experience and my perception of Islam, and perhaps you may be interested to go further. And for sure there's no compulsion. You're free to choose, but you're also free to keep on making mistakes if you want to. So I hope that, God willing, you'd have thought about some new questions that you'd like to ask me, and we'll leave it now open for the questions. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We all thank Brother Yusuf Islam for his speech, and inshallah now we come to the question and answer period. There will be papers distributed among you for questions for the ones who don't like to ask questions orally. And there will be gentlemen collecting those papers to be answered, inshallah. Also, I would like to tell you that please, there are two microphones over here. One on the right and the other one on the left. But please, while sending, don't let the line get to more than 3 because we don't want it to be crowded. When the first go and then a third one can come into the line. Maybe you've all received the blue form while entering the room. And those blue forms are, as you've all read, to anyone who would like to receive the tape of this lecture, and you just have to fill the form and submit it outside, and then you'll be answered. Now, if you'd like to continue your question.
Yeah, I noticed that when you were quoting the hadith in regard to things that Prophet Muhammad had to say about women, that all of the hadiths that you mentioned were concerning women. I mean, motherhood, excuse me. Now, I've got nothing against motherhood. But I know that certainly that when Prophet Muhammad talks about men, he talks about the dignity of man in other regards besides fatherhood. And I'm wondering what indeed does, can you tell me what some of the hadiths are about the station of women outside of her role as a mother?
Right. First of all, motherhood is incredibly important. Even though some women may say, well, look, I'm not going to be a mother, therefore what's my, where's my guidance? Or what am I supposed to do? You mustn't forget that she has a mother. And she's got to behave towards that mother the way that the Prophet has taught, to give respect to parents. But we should also realize that the role of the woman in the Islamic society is vital in other areas as well. We find that in the life of the Prophet himself, his first wife, Khadija, was 25 years older than he was. She was a wealthy woman, she was a businesswoman. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad, before he was prophet, in his time as a merchant, he worked for Khadija, and finally she proposed to him. So there's nothing wrong also in understanding that women can be business women, they can have their own business. And also another point, that any wealth that a woman has is safeguarded in Islam as being her wealth. She doesn't have to part with one penny of that wealth. When she gets married, it's the duty of the husband to provide. She has no duty whatsoever to provide for the upkeep of the house, for even her own clothes. So that falls on the responsibility of the man. But she can earn what is hers. She can inherit from her family, from her parents. Also, she keeps her own name. Quite interestingly now, you find this trend amongst Americans, I think, that women like to keep their name, their own identity. Well, actually, every Muslim woman that, if you ask their name, they'll give you the name of their father, of their family. They'll give you the name of their family. They won't change their name when they get married. These are certain things which we find in Islam. But of course, one of the greatest duties, as we were talking about, education, really falls onto the lap of the mother. The mother, it's said, the lap of the mother is the first school. She is the one who brings up the people of this society. So her role as a teacher is vitally important, and she should be given freedom, and that is what she's given in the Islamic society. Of course, you need doctors, like there are certain things in Islamic jurisprudence that indicate, for instance, you need women as doctors because women like to be treated by women. If there's an emergency, you can't say, no, I'm not going to be treated by a man. Of course not. That's an emergency. But preferably, women like to be treated by women. So there needs to be women doctors. There need to be perhaps women solicitors, because only women can understand the problems of other women. So from that respect, Islam leaves the door open for women to have a career, but it shouldn't in any way, I would say it's on the conscience of the woman not to make her family life suffer because of that. Because of her career, she shouldn't sacrifice the upbringing of her children. And we know, I think today I heard something about this thing in America called, what's it called? Latchkey children or something like that. Something like that, latchkey. Means they go home, there's no mother there, no one to receive them, no love. Where do they go? They start, going on the wrong way. So that's why she is given security, the mother is given security within the Islamic framework. As far as the men are concerned, of course, it's their duty to provide. They've been built a little bit stronger for that purpose, perhaps, to do that job. But men and women have a harmonious role to play together in the bringing up of society.
Would you like to read the questions?
You read the questions, I think. Maybe if there are some which are close together, then.
The next question is... okay, go ahead, brother.
Well, I came here tonight, probably some other people did not. They're a Christian or a Muslim or someone looking for something. So you have to make differences between the two, and then you can figure out to start more with the similarities rather than the differences between them. And in particular, one similarity I had is the concept of eternal punishment. And I'm curious as to how a God, Allah, can be at once merciful and at the same time condemn a non-believer to being a loser.
It's a good question, and it's something that you should think about. We should all think about. Basically, as it says in the Quran, that a soul only harms itself. So if you choose the path of destruction, you'll have it. If you choose the path of ascent, you can have it. But there is a difference. There must be a difference. Otherwise, the purpose of life itself, as seen from the Islamic view, will be without a purpose. The purpose is to be tested. If you look at the example of Adam in the garden, Adam and Eve, we see from the Islamic perspective, this was a lesson. We're not being punished here because our forefather Adam, made a mistake, so now we're being punished. No. That was a lesson which God had prepared for him in order to remember one golden rule: obey God. Don't disobey him, otherwise you'll find yourself in trouble. Then that was a lesson which he came to this earth with, and a lesson which we learn today. This earth is like the testing ground. There are things which God has said, don't touch it. Things which God has said, feel free. And in fact, the basic rule in Islam is that everything is allowed except those things which are forbidden. Rather than everything is forbidden except those things are allowed. The choice is much wider than we think. But there are things which are forbidden. That is the test. I heard a very interesting example given by Dr. Jamal Badawi. He said, well, say for instance if it was like that. No difference. Everybody goes to heaven. You know, so you have this picture, dawn in paradise. You have Hitler, Stalin walking along together side by side. They come across Mother Teresa. Say, good morning. Say, good morning. So, well, it didn't matter that much, really, did it? You know, is there justice in that? No. There has to be justice. A person makes his own grave, or makes his own hell. If we want the paradise which God has prepared for us, we must be ready to sacrifice something.
Oh, okay. Oh. There's a gentleman over there. Go ahead.
Okay. I guess my question relates to what you were saying earlier. I don't know much about Islam, but you said that Islam is submission to God and following God's laws. I guess my question is, can any of us keep God's laws perfectly? I mean, I don't think any of us can. I think, knowing myself and other people, you give me a set of rules and I'm going to break each and every one of them at some point in my life. My question is, if God is just, how can He not condemn us for breaking the laws, even if we only break one of them in our entire life? How is it that any of us can have paradise to be with God?
That's a good question also, because it leads to the concept of God's forgiveness. And, you know, when I became a Muslim, I had no doubt whatsoever that what I was doing was correcting myself. You know, you can make scribbles and you can make some mistakes. Finally, you know, you may get it right. But then you may also make some mistakes after that. When I embraced Islam, I knew that my sins were forgiven because I was coming to God pure, ready to submit. That is the act of submission which God is waiting for. Repentance, which means stop what you were doing before, feel sorry about it, and make a kind of resolution not to do it again. Those are basically the three requirements for acceptance of one's repentance. For sure, we're going to make mistakes, because man, if you look at the model of Adam, again as an example, Adam forgot. He shouldn't think that he went out to, disobey God. No. He was enticed, he was diverted by the shaitan, by the devil, to make that mistake. So he forgot. He lost his balance. We lose our balance. At every stage in our humanity, we are somehow weak. We are somehow relying on something or someone else to fill in our gaps. But God requires of us not perfection, because if He wanted perfection, He would have created us perfect. But what He requires is that we have intention to change, and that we change ourselves whenever we find ourselves on the wrong way. So there's a saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that says, every son of Adam is a sinner, or makes mistakes, because the word sin has some kind of stigma attached to it, but it means every son of Adam makes mistakes. But the best of you is the one who makes mistakes and repents most often. Therefore, whenever you find yourself in that position, and it also says in the Quran, cover up a bad deed with a good deed. There's a way out. That is not to look down and think that, oh, my time, because that's what the shaitan wants you to do. He said, look, you've done this, you've done that, forget it now. No chance. So I said, well, I might as well. And there's a story about one that I have to elongate some of these answers because there are some interesting sayings. Once a man, he killed 99 people. So he went looking for someone, a scholar, and he found a scholar. He said, tell me, can I be forgiven? I've killed 99 people. He said, no way, you're joking. He said, you're going straight to hell. So I said, well, let it be 100. So he killed him. Then he went looking for another scholar. He felt bad. So he looked and found another scholar. He said, can I be forgiven? I've killed 100 people. He says, yes. He said, all you have to do is go to such and such a place. They will teach you. And go there and reform yourself. So he went. Before he got there, he died. Then there was a battle. Because the angel of good and the angel, both angels are good, but one who was taking care of the good people, one was taking care of the bad people, they were kind of fighting about who was going to get him. Because he'd killed 100 people, the angel of the left said, he's mine. The angel of the right said, no, he was going to go to this place, he'd reformed. So then, it was decided by another angel, they said, well, we'll measure exactly where he died, how far he was to where he was going from where he went. At that point, God caused the earth to shrink, and the man was found on that side, the side to which he was going. In other words, it is, of course, by God's mercy, but your intention is vital. You intend to change, you're sincere, God accepts that.
Okay, can you wait so we can give a period for those who wrote the question? A short question is, what was your name before Cass Stevens?
That's easy. It was Stephen Dimitri Georgiou. Stephen Dimitri Georgiou, which is a sort of mostly Greek sounding.
Where did you live as you studied Islam? Do you work now, and as what?
Well, when I embraced Islam, I'd already made a packet. So I more or less lived off the investment of that. As it says in the jurisprudence of Islam, that whatever you earned before Islam, it's allowed, even if you made it from selling alcohol or whatever, providing you didn't steal it, because then you have to return it back. That's another condition of repentance. If you did something wrong to someone, then you have to return that thing, of course. That's sincerity. But if it's like money you earn, that's allowed. And I figured from that point that I would, and I invested that money anyway, and that provides me with my living today. As far as record royalties are concerned, so when records royalties come to me, I usually put them into a trust, and I've spent on different projects like school and Muslim Aid and various things which I use that money for. I obviously I don't have to work as such, but I'm not frightened of working. It's just that God has given me this chance to study, and I use that chance the best way I can. And I'd like to go into business, but I haven't got the time.
I'm wondering if you've ever considered using your music to communicate a message of Islam and use your talents in that way?
Yes, I have considered, in which way I could serve by helping people to understand Islam, whether or not that could be done through music. But eventually I thought that I don't want to commercialize in any way, my faith, or to sell it in any way. That was my attitude from the very beginning, and that's why I stayed away. And I felt that it was important to have a space, a silence, until I learned, what was necessary to know, so that I don't make any mistakes. But if you're asking, can you use music, to propagate Islam, perhaps you can, to some extent, help people to understand some basic ideas through songs. But I don't think it should be commercialized as such. It should be, I'm thinking about perhaps producing, I've written a couple of poems just for the children, in the school, which we've established for primary children. And that's where I'm at the moment. I feel that it's the children who need sometimes to sing, little song. I wrote this poem called A is for Allah, and they're singing that in most Muslim schools actually at the moment. I find that harmless, and I wouldn't mind perhaps making an LP, producing an LP. But as far as my voice is concerned, I prefer perhaps to use that in some other way, maybe reciting the Quran. You heard me today recite Quran. We're encouraged to recite the Quran, because if you look at communication or records, you have two things: someone who's sending out a message, someone who's receiving it. When we're dealing on a human plane, I'm a human being sending out some kind of vibes from my own, emotions, my own character, my personality. You're receiving it. When we're talking about the Quran, this is the word, the communication coming direct from God to us, human beings. So the highest form of communication must be the revelation of God. Therefore, I'd like, if possible, maybe one day, God willing, to do something on record or something for people to hear the Quran and to hear its meaning. That's my intention, but God knows if I'll ever achieve it.
You still play your own music, your old music?
No, I don't. Sometimes I do sneak a listen every now and again, just to see how right I am.
The people sending, would you please let us have one oral question, one written question, okay? If someone wants to be a Muslim, what is the first thing you advise him to do, as far as you went through that?
As you want.
As you went.
As you went through that, right. The first thing to do is to declare your faith, as I did. It can be in front of one Muslim, in front of two Muslims, it doesn't matter. It could be in front of an imam. The point is that you declare that you're a Muslim from that day on. But when you say those words, I testify that there is no God but the one God, and that Muhammad is his servant and messenger, there is also a right on that. There are rights attached to that. That means that now you must establish in your life a regular pattern which God has provided us. There are 5 things which a Muslim should try to achieve. These are the basic things. One is to testify, as we said before. Then it is to make regular prayer. Then it is to give in charity of your wealth 1/40 every year to the needy. Then it is to practice a form of fasting in a certain month, which means you fast in the daylight hours in 1 month of the year. You eat in the night time, but you fast in the daytime. And then there is the pilgrimage to Mecca, which you try to make if you can. If you can't, there's no obligation. Again, fasting is one of those things, if you're well enough, if you're sick, of course there's no obligation. But you try to make it up. But one of the essential things is the prayer, because even when you're on your deathbed, you should be keeping your prayer, your connection with God. And that's what I found the most important helping means of helping me to change from one way of life to another, because in the middle of your daily life, you're doing this or that, or you're totally involved in it. Then suddenly the time for prayer comes. You say, I've got to leave this. So you become softer in your heart. You start remembering God more. That's the purpose of it, to remember God in your day, every day. Not just to leave for one day of the week or one. So therefore prayer is the first thing to learn. And before you can pray, you must learn how to wash, to purify yourself. And so I suggest that you do that, you try your best to learn how to pray, you declare your Islam, you learn how to pray, and then learn your Islam from that day on.
Is there a way to ask like 2 questions? Good. No. Oh yeah?
No, I just want to shorten the...
Yeah, I feel like I'm my life.
No. So
Really coordination.
you said you have 2 questions?
Yeah. Well, one is just sort of like a throw out that's fast.
Okay. Go ahead.
How were you born, like the month? What month were you born in?
Now I'm going to trick you.
No, I'm not real off on the astrology. I was just curious.
Ramadan. Those of you who don't know the Islamic months are forgiven.
That's a whole new country. No, for America though. The Christian calendar. I'm more aware of.
You mean the Gregorian one?
Yeah, right.
July.
Oh, okay, no. I was just, that's great. Okay. No, okay, the other question. I'm not really quite sure if I really understand the connections between this one religion, Islam, and like the Jewish religion and Christian religion, and I guess basically even ones that are coming about every day of the year that I don't know about yet, but most of the religions are. Because I know, well, my knowledge is all religions you need to submit or else you're not religious. And you need to dedicate sometimes to prayer during the day or else you're still not religious. And you need to fast your body or else it's full of dirt, so you're still not religious. And they do all pray to the mother because without it, with technology, we still have kids now, but I mean...
Not quite.
And on and whatever.
Okay, so what...
Basically, they all say honesty, beauty, goodness, and give to the poor, and you will receive wealth, and, all that good stuff. And don't hang out your body, people have girlfriends and that,
So what you're saying is, the question is, what's the difference? I think the difference is in the perfection of this religion. You see, previously, the religion of all the prophets was one and the same. In other words, what Moses taught was to worship God. And he came with laws, or was given laws. Those laws were, by the way, already pretty much in existence anyway, because the laws of Abraham were certainly not that different, or the laws of Noah. But he came also with a certain sunnah. He was a leader. You had to follow him. He's the prophet. So you had to follow him. If you were born in the time of Moses, you'd have to follow him. If you were born in the time of Jesus, you have to follow him. He is, as he said, the way, every prophet in fact was the way, the light, the truth, because every prophet came as a key, to enter into covenant, or to find out the truth. You have to come through the selected one, the one who's appointed by God. So For the mission of Jesus, you had to follow him. He came with a certain example. He brought back certain things into the religion which almost had become so legalized, so traditionalized in the Jewish faith that there was no more spirit left. So he came in a way to bring an extra clarity. That was the last of the prophets to be sent to the children of Israel. The final prophet was from the seed of Abraham. I don't know if you know, but Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. From Isaac you have all the prophets ending with Jesus. And from Ishmael you have but one prophet, the Prophet Muhammad, because he came from the descendants from Abraham. There you have a final prophet coming as a seal to confirm the message of Jesus, to confirm the message of Moses, and to put some things right which had become somehow forgotten or distorted in the process. For instance, we may say that, oh, the Jews believe that there's only one God. That's fine, we accept that. But also they've developed this idea that God is for them and they're the chosen ones. That concept has been developed. But in truth, they are supposed to be righteous. That is only their righteousness that's going to put them in the right way. But this development of this idea, Jesus was a prophet sent to the children of Israel. Why didn't they believe? That was a major mistake. They tried to accuse him of being a false prophet. They tried to accuse him of blasphemy, so many things. But in Christianity, and they denied Jesus as being a prophet or a messenger of God or the Messiah. The Christians, on the other hand, have exaggerated the position of Jesus to such a point that he is worshipped. Now the other prophets were just kind of steps towards this one major event which is to take place in the world, the Messiah. Whereas Islam gives you a balance between those things. It doesn't deny the messengership of Jesus, it clarifies it. But also puts back the important thing, the aspect of equality in the human race. And that you can't die for my sins, and because I'm born of this particular tribe isn't going to save me. These basic inaccuracies had to be corrected. And the Prophet Muhammad corrected. It wasn't his will, he was given the duty of being the last messenger. So from that point of view, it is seen as a completion, a perfection of the religion, and a clarification of the religion which had gone before.
Okay. I think that's great. Oh, can I just say one thing?
Okay, right question?
Wait, those clarification was what you just...
Okay, but please make it quick because
You were one...
My real name is now Yusuf.
Sorry. When I used to listen to your music as a kid, I thought you sounded great, okay? My philosophy of the world is sort of like a dream, sort of like what you just said, basically
Right.
religion, whatever, you know. I really don't understand why you had to join a statement to be a statement when your songs were singing the statement. And now that you joined it, you no longer give what you gave me as a kid to walk around the world and give others if I can out the door. You understand?
Right. I think I do. I thank you for that. The thing is that when I was singing, you must realize I was searching. In no way could I have ever, guided even, a mouse. I couldn't guide anybody into the right way of life. I could tell them what my thoughts were, and we could have similar thoughts, and that from that point of view we could share some certain values together because of our being brought up in the same, basic society. But when it comes to guiding people, it's a vitally important job, which is not left up to politicians, and it shouldn't be, or to singers, or poets, or stars, or your daily horoscope, writer. It is the job, and it has been the job of prophets to guide. Therefore, I had to follow someone. All of us have idols, in a way. In some way, heroes, if you like. Someone who we try to follow. In the beginning, our dad, if you're a boy, is the ideal. So therefore, we all take on these leaders, and we follow certain people who we associate with. But the real person to follow is the one who has got the right, the certification or the sanction to lead people, and that is the Prophet. You must have a leader. In the grave, there's a saying, you'll be asked, you won't be asked, who your favorite rock singer was or what your political party affiliations were. No, you'll be asked, who is your Lord? And who is your Prophet? Who did you follow? What is your religion? That's the question that's going to be asked. We have to prepare for that. And now I believe I'm doing a service by explaining what I believe to be the right way of answering those questions.
Now, as we have a big pile of questions, I would like to ask 2 questions from the written and 1 from the oral, if the people standing don't mind. Okay. Here I have a paper saying death and eternity. I don't know if this is a question understandable.
It's not a question, really.
Just death and eternity.
Death and eternity. Yeah, it's not really a question.
It's
Okay. No. Death is a change from one thing to another. Life in this earth is viewed as, a time, a period, and then there is a period following that called death. It's not extinction, although you don't exist as such in body or let's say in action, mind, you're not able to think or act, but you are still in a way existing. Then there is the life after death, which is the eternal life. That is the one we are working for. This earth, as it's said by the Prophet, is a work field for the hereafter. Whatever you do here will have its result or effect in your life in the hereafter. So that's the view of Islamic view of death, and that no soul, that every soul must taste death. But on one day will come when death will be no longer, and there will be your existence in whatever plane, either in the garden or in the fire.
Thank you. According to the first 7 verses of the Quran, God should only accept those who follow a straight path and not stray. Do Islams, I think the one who asked the question wants to say, do Muslims have any belief in forgiveness? If so, to what extent?
Yes, forgiveness is stressed in Islam, but there are 2 types. You might say 2 areas here. One is the personal area, which we all have the right to forgive. Somebody, for instance, reverses his car into my hedge or gate, breaks it. I've got the right to forgive that person, and Islam encourages forgiveness. The Prophet said, forgive, wouldn't you love, don't you want God to forgive you? So forgive, overlook people's faults. But there are other things in Islam which are rights to be upheld, like the rights of justice. Certain times, if somebody kills someone else, then there is a certain process of justice goes on. A person should be answerable for that. Somebody has killed that person, so they have to answer for that. Now, when it comes to that point, it's very interesting. In Islam, the state doesn't take over. But the state should find the guilty person, but the state doesn't take over and then decide what to do with that person. It's up to the family who has lost the person, their beloved one, to decide whether or not to forgive that person or to demand that his life be taken as recompense. That is the right given to every family. Not to the judge, not to the state, but to the family of the departed, the one who was killed. And it's encouraged, of course, to forgive. But at that point, some people, because it's their loved ones, may find at that time impossible to forgive. And if they see, and as we see it in UK today, and I don't know if it's so much here in the US, but murderers after 7 years walking out, the effect on the family of that person who has lost that beloved one. At least they can have the right to say, I forgive you. Then at least they've got rid of it. But they're not given that right. In Islam they are. But there are also other things which God has asked us to uphold. That is always, certain aspects of justice and righteousness. Sometimes it's not right to overlook the sinfulness of certain aspects of the society. You have to try and work for their change and for their betterment. And forgiving, means if you forgive it, you say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. But one day these sins are going to affect you. If it's not going to affect the society and it's just a personal affair, then you're encouraged to forgive.
Yes, I have a question. I remember reading once that Islam teaches against the lending of money at interest. Now, if that is the case, then how does a modern Muslim manage to live in the modern world? How do they manage to get by on morally?
I could ask the same question. How do you manage to live with this system of mortgages and credit, endless credit? You don't. You end up constantly being in debt. Yes, there is the alternative. Islam confirms, in fact, the teaching which was already in the Mosaic law, which is that usury or interest is forbidden. Giving, interest, taking interest is forbidden. So therefore, trade is blessed. Trading. And originally, if you go back, you see that the most, how people were interacting, economically was through trading. I have got this and you got that and we trade and this and that. It's a wonderfully healthy situation. But if you happen to have a lot of wealth, then you're encouraged, if someone needs either to give or to give what is called qard hasana, a good loan. It means you give them that loan and then you work out, he says when he's going to pay it back, and he pays it back penny for penny. You can't ask for 1 penny more. If that system was prevailing in the world today, there'd be no inflation. There'd be no need to have interest because, money would stay at its value. But because money is making money on money, there's actually no work going on. Everything is, rushing ahead and we're losing out the value of money. At one time, £1 was worth so much gold in the bank. There's not any more gold in the bank. It's just a piece of paper. So therefore, the Islamic system brings you back to real values and it avoids this kind of thing where some people, as I say, 1% have 36% of the wealth of the world. It wouldn't help them at all to have that wealth because they couldn't spend more than they can feed their stomach. They can have palaces. Who's going to care where they're going to live? Only one place at a time. Therefore, the Islamic system really encourages the rotation of money where it's needed.
Now we come to the 2 written questions. You said one question is asked in the grave. If I answered the question wrong because I was ignorant of Allah, would I be condemned as a loser? Would I be condemned?
Ah, yes. Well, it says in the Quran that even before we were created, then the seed of Adam was brought forth and made to witness. And God said, "Am I not your Lord?" And we said, "Yea, you are our Lord." So from our very creation, from the very beginning, even before we were brought into this world, which is why we find it so easy, when times of trouble come, we say, "Oh God," immediately. We don't have a second hesitation. When we're really in trouble and no one around to help us, we pray to God, because we know instinctively that God is there. That is being confirmed to us through prophets. Now those who have heard the message clearly, of course they will be judged very clearly. Those who had a conscience and who felt that they were doing something wrong or that there was more to know and they ignored it, they will be questioned on their ignorance. Why? Of course you won't be questioned if you're insane, if you die before the age where you can have actually responsibility of your mind to decide. But ignoring, the word ignoring, if you look at it, people aren't born just ignorant. They stay ignorant by choice. They decide not to learn. Ignoring means, ignorance comes from ignoring the truth. Like I say, I want to learn how to be a doctor, but I've got no way to be a doctor. You know that there's a school, you know that there's someone who's a teacher who can teach you how to be a doctor. You just have to take those little steps to find him. That's why I think Jesus said, knock and it shall be open to you. Because the only question is your willingness to learn. So also ignorance is not a good excuse to rely on the day of judgment, because that ignorance is laziness in the matters so important to us, such as life and death and the life beyond. So therefore God knows who is going to be a loser. We are not here as judges, but we are here just to mention, to give good news, and to also give a hesitant warning to those who think that, oh, I've got a place made, don't worry, God loves me.
The question says, don't you think that Islam, with its all restrictions, especially about sex and the too much use during everyday's life, like praying, is not very practical for nowadays, and especially being Muslim and single and cannot afford to get married in America for the Western world in general? Jackie.
So that means you can afford to have girlfriends but not to get married. You can afford not to give your wife a place to live permanently. Well, that means you shouldn't get married. You shouldn't go out with girls until you're able to look after your wife, of course. But then again, marriage shouldn't be that I've got to have a car, I've got to have the greatest, flat, I've got to be able to impress. No, because Islam is very humble. You don't have to impress anybody. You just have to get married as soon as you can. And the Prophet encouraged that. He said there are three things you should rush to do. One is to pay a debt. One is to bury the dead. And the other is to marry as soon as you're able. And from that point of view, from the Islamic point of view, that is the moment that a person is responsible enough to take on the duties and responsibilities of marriage. So get married. That will protect you from all the other problems you could get yourself into by not doing so. I started from the back to front. Now, going to the beginning, don't you think Islam, with all its restrictions, as I said from the very beginning, everything is allowed except those things which are forbidden. And those things which are forbidden is fornication outside of marriage. To have relationships with your wife, that is your personal affair, and there is no restriction, except certain points which actually won't go into. But there's too much dues during everyday's life, like praying. Too much dues. So to be alive, you think you've got nothing to do, just live, and you've got nothing to do except to eat. Of course, you have to eat also for your soul. You have to give some nourishment to your spirit. I find that the prayer was so important in giving me that freedom, that air to be away from everything else, to turn to God, to turn towards everlasting values and try and revive myself, because it's a way of reviving yourself. And therefore, a person who doesn't pray, he's more or less dead. I mean, I can't understand how people can just go through a whole day, now without praying. It seems strange to me, just as strange as someone might say today it is to pray. But anyway, there's no difficulty in being a Muslim. It's only apparently made to look as if it's difficult, but it's not.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
Muslims I've spoken with have been very proud that the Quran is the same as the religion was first given to them. And I can even understand the best way to appreciate the book is to learn Arabic and read it. You mentioned that you started by reading the English translation. That's been something talk with me. I hesitate to start something and I'm not sure I'll be able to finish. I'm not sure I have any aptitude at all for learning the Arabic language.
No. Please don't listen to that brother who's talking to you about having to learn Arabic. Because it says in the Quran, we sent a messenger, always sent a messenger in the language of the people that he spoke to. So the language which you understand, English, the values of that language, we have good, we have bad, we have the same meanings in our words as is in the Quran. Of course, it's not the Quran, because the Quran means that we can refer at all times to the original words themselves, the original meanings. And sometimes you can't get exactly the meaning of an Arabic word in English, but you have to use 3 words to get that meaning. But at the same time, when it comes to understanding basic moral values, and especially the oneness of God, we all understand what that means. And there's no problem, I think, in learning or reading the Quran in English. You don't have to learn Arabic. But if you've got the desire to get to the real, source, it's there available for you. I know many Muslims who have never learnt more than just what is necessary to pray. And they've stayed on that level and they're quite happy. And so therefore you shouldn't be put off by the fact that you don't know Arabic. Arabic is something, if you have the time, it will enrich you to be able to get to the source of the Quran itself rather than a translation.
Question. Since every one of the very few people who had the chance to be a Muslim and non-Muslim, and since all religions have the basics, what really are the major differences you acknowledge in your life as a Muslim and before that? Kamal Abdu.
The basic difference, as I mentioned before in my talk, is the fact that Islam is completion. It's like the quintessence of the faith. I don't think we can explain any more than I've already explained, I think, in my previous talks.
I noticed you emphasized that you felt you need to get married in a hurry. Your last concert was in 79 and you married in 79. Did you choose any woman? It should be any woman. Or did you fall in love first? You didn't mention anything about love.
Well, that's where the concept of the goddess, which I had in my mind before, disappeared. Because when I realized that you have to get married, then you have to seek a partner. What kind of partner are you going to seek? A goddess? No. But what the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, there are 4 things to look for in a woman. One is beauty, one is wealth, one is nobility, the other is piety. And he is successful who chooses piety. So I went looking for a pious Muslim girl, and I found a pious Muslim girl who prayed and I was attracted to. And love in Islam, or in this perspective of Islam, comes after marriage. Love develops, and my marriage is a proof of that. Once a man came to Umar, who was the second caliph of Islam, said, I'm fed up with my wife, there's no more love anymore. He said, is that all marriage is to you? Sleeping together? Where's the respect? Where's the honor? Where's the responsibility? So many things he mentioned. Is that all that marriage is to you? So when that disappears, what is left? Actually, in Islam, you can enjoy every aspect of married life. But the first thing is you put piety and virtuousness first.